find it.
Got it. Okay. So I talked vaguely about some of the work I was doing with OpenStreetMap last time I was at this meeting. And so I tried to put it together into a little bit of a briefing that talks about how OpenStreetMap could more broadly support federal data interoperability in the role of a common a repository for common geographies. And so I'll go through a specific problem that's familiar to everybody. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just using this as an example. And this is really just, this isn't a DOI solution. It's not a geo-platform solution. These are really like my notes and thoughts on on a problem and a work in progress on how OpenStreetMap could fit into a solution to this problem. Let's see, can I change my, there we go. So pick some place in the world. I picked one place, Big Ditch Lake, West Virginia. And we're gonna go through this particular spot and see how it fits in our world. So we can Google Big Ditch Lake, West Virginia, and we can see it on a map. We can see it's a lake. We can see it has a couple of different names, Big Ditch Run, but there's nothing special about it. It's just one spot, one geography. And we can look up Big Ditch Lake in a National Inventory of Dams, because Big Ditch Lake, it turns out, is a dam. So it's a dam, it's a lake, and it's a dam, and it exists in the National Inventory of Dams. And we can find that we know a lot of information about it. We know where it is. So in our government database, right, we have an open API, can tell us a lot about it, an ability to integrate the data. And then we can look it up elsewhere in the National Hydrography Dataset and find more information about it. But we know, for instance, the National Inventory of Dams, National Levee Database, National Hydrography Database, not super integrated, right? They're just different data sets, different purposes. But we can continue on down through this, looking at different times in different places. People in the federal government might want to reference Big Ditch Lake. And one place you might want to reference it is in the bipartisan infrastructure law. And you see here is how I came up with this is my sample size of 1, because I looked up IIJA projects, and A1 was Big Ditch Lake. Well, it wasn't Big Ditch Lake, it was Big Ditch Run, dam number 1. And you can imagine how much time it took me to track that down. So, well, it had a location, Big Ditch Run, dam 1. And it turns out it's mapped and it's nicely, but it's a watershed rehabilitation program, Big Ditch Run, and so on, right? And so I found across some number of federal projects all of these different references to this place in the world, right? We got Big Ditch Run, Lake 1, number 1, and you know how complicated it is, right? If it was Big Ditch Lake, we might be able to find it, but number 1, site 1, #1, all different ways it's been referred to, and then it's mapped repeatedly. It's mapped in National Inventory Dams, mapped in National Levee Database, mapped in National Hydrography Database, mapped in OpenStreetMap, and but they're all different geographies. And you might be able to say, well, we could be clever here and see this polygon that represents the dam. We could potentially do like a point and polygon query, figure out that all 3 of these locations are here, but they're actually 3 different web services, 3 different APIs. Just doing that one query to query these 3 services inside this polygon would be a day's work for somebody, I'm sure. And that would solve the problem just for this one case where you have an NHD polygon and these points which happen to be nicely mapped here. So that's just not really a solution, right? It's just a mess, right? The data are not integrated, and the way we plan to integrate it is really just by letting Google search and hope to find the data about Big Ditch Lake, #1, all of those things, we would just hope Google would let us find them. So the idea is, this is where maybe OpenStreetMap comes in, is the idea, certainly not a new idea, but the idea of using the principles and concepts of linked open data to harmonize the data across these different projects, these different databases, not altering the databases, but referencing a common geography. I briefly considered using, not briefly, I for quite a while considered using Genus for this, but it's not quite the right not quite the right data set. I considered using Wikipedia as a source of, or Wikidata as a source of integration, but then I really spent a lot of time going through OpenStreetMap, and because it has complex geography, not just allowing a pin on a map for a dam, but a complex polygon for a dam with a relation to things like bridges that might go over the dam, relation to the reservoir behind the dam. There seems like a lot of potential there. And so what I've done is gone through, at least on Army Corps of Engineers data, all the recreation site, all the projects in the budget with recreation data. I've linked all of those to OpenStreetMap. And then at the last minute, I added this slide to my briefing showing how we also did it for Bureau of Transportation waterway lock theme. I actually did this, I wasn't going to show it. But the same thing, I took all of the waterway locks, which is a national geospatial data asset in the Bureau of Transportation Statistics data set. All of those, well, almost all of those, I was able to find a reference to in OpenStreetMap. So the question in this really basic case is, why am I the government bothering to collect and manage these pins for these locks? I mean, all this National Geospatial data set is, all this Army Corps of Engineers data set is, from a geographic perspective, is 200 or so pins. Like, what's the value of those pins compared to the reference to these more complicated geographies as an NGDA? So imagine this NGDA being just a reference to the geography rather than its own geography. So that's really the punchline. So we have a set of tools available in OpenStreetMap for querying the data. We have a set of tools available in GeoPlatform for exposing certain data and linking them together. And the idea is to consider how something like the GeoPlatform and the National Geospatial Data Infrastructure could be enhanced by using a common geographic reference like an OpenStreetMap ID for different federal geospatial data sources. And so the next things I'll work on here, demonstrating two-way data between these systems, or between systems. One where we show displaying and querying OpenStreetMap data within a federal system, and then one where we try and show an open system, a public-facing system, where the federal data is queryable from OpenStreetMap. So something like federal risk for dam failure or funding for a lock could be queried by users of OpenStreetMap data. And that's what I'm going to try and work on next. And if we got to this, I did 20 slides in 10 minutes. So any questions?